Okay, we're reviewing, this is the study guide for IBUS 75, test number 2. One of the things we talked about before is that logistics is a subset of supply chain organizationally, and supply chain is a subset of marketing in most organizational, large organizations. Sometimes supply chain is part of operations. It really belongs, in my view, in marketing. One of the things that's changed supply chain over the years was containerization. The internet changed how global trade was done, which meant the sourcing of product, the speed at which it got delivered or acquired. All of that changed as our economy started to globalize. We have a current political environment that is suggesting that it would be in our country's best interest to focus on, as it relates to trade, I think the term is America First. Since I teach primarily international business classes, I don't embrace that particular concept for a couple of reasons. Number one, most of my career has been doing business overseas. There's a marketing concept called comparative advantage, where you really want products to be produced where they have the greatest natural advantage, because then it's a better product and it's a lower cost. Okay. In the marketing department, in our marketing classes, we talk about the 4 Ps: product, place, price, promotion. The question is, where does logistics fit? Since it's a subset of marketing, where does it sit in those 4 Ps? Well, it's not part of the product, it's not part of the price, it's not promotion, so the most logical play is place. Where's the product being purchased? Where's the product being sold? That's what logistics does. That's its element. We talked about the strategic advantage of the ports of LA and Long Beach, I think before, but we'll talk about it again. The ships are getting bigger, consequently they have to go between higher concentrations of cargo. Well, 40% of all containerized cargo comes into the LA Long Beach port. A couple of reasons. One, it's a deep water port. You have to have deep water for these big ships. Secondly, you need to have the physical infrastructure, the ports, the land around the water. You need to have a rail infrastructure, truck highway infrastructure to move that cargo further inland. The other issue is its proximity to where most of the manufacturing is done, and right now it's in Central Asia. Started out years ago in Northern Asia, then I went to Central Asia, now it's going to Southern Asia. And as you go farther and farther south, when you get into Bangladesh and India, you can just as easily run a ship eastbound, westbound, through the Suez Canal up into the east coast of the United States. And that's where, as that cargo starts to be manufactured farther and farther south in Asia, there becomes another alternative. One of the companies that just recently went out of business, Toys R Us, was the originator of what we'll call pool logistics. One of my clients, Bridgestone Tires, used to run their plants in Japan 24/7, and they would just simply pump out tires nonstop. And those tires would come in, and if they weren't selling, they would simply go in our warehouse and we would get paid money to store those tires until somebody bought them. That's a push mechanism. Toys R Us, many years ago, took the pull mechanism, which is every time you sold a Barbie doll, they would count and say, okay, there's 100 Barbie dolls, now I'll order 100 more Barbie dolls. So their inventory levels were much lower. That's what started this concept, what we call just-in-time manufacturing. You don't manufacture until somebody actually wants to try to buy it. You shorten that time, you reduce your inventory carrying costs. You don't end up with a lot of obsolete inventory by doing that. This is something Walmart has now been doing for many years. They've kind of mastered that. That's called pull logistics. And that's the trend, is moved towards pull logistics. If you take a look down at the port, the type of ships that come in on a regular basis, most of the ones you're going to see are these big container ships. The second group of ships that you're going to see are tankers that bring in a lot of oil into LA Long Beach, which gets refined, and then into gasoline, which you then consume to get back and forth to class or your work or whatever. There's also passenger ships, but that's a small category. This question is, the most important strategy for logistics is to create, and the three answers are a military-style organization, a highly reliable, cost-effective logistics network, and the lowest cost logistics network. Historically, logistics, which was then called transportation, was in silos. Trucking operated separately of rail, which operated separately of warehousing, right? All ships, ocean, separate. Everything was separate. You had all these handoffs, which meant it was very, very inefficient. And that hierarchical is the military style. If you simply go to the lowest cost logistics network, like a boxcar from here to Pascagoula, Mississippi, it'll get there. It just may take 60 days. And you may never know whether it's going to be 60 days, 30 days, 15 days. You're not going to know, right? So what you're looking for is the most highly reliable, cost-effective logistics network. One of the things that we do in our face-to-face class is I have a big tub that I pour water in, and I have a ship that's made with Legos. It's a hull with a bunch of Legos. And I teach the class how to load a container ship. Why is that important? Well, if you're trying to recover freight from one of those big ships coming in, knowing how those things are loaded and the mechanism behind how it's loaded helps you figure out when your cargo is going to be available, so you don't have to just call somebody. You can kind of figure it out yourself. Historically, logistics, which used to be transportation, again, you had these hierarchies. You had ships and terminals. You had trucks and terminals. You had rail cars and engines and terminals. You had warehouses, right? And they all operated separately, which meant it was all assets. It's an asset. A truck is an asset. A ship is an asset. A warehouse is an asset. Today, because those things are interfacing so much, the process on how they interface is just as important as the asset itself. Wrong side. This is a good one. And I'm going to speak specifically in the warehousing industry because it's the one that uses the most amount of labor of all the logistics elements. Most warehouses, depending on where they're at around the country, are not homogeneously culturally. They don't have one culture. Like you won't have a warehouse with everybody that's Italian, or you won't have a warehouse where everybody's Vietnamese. But yet, people have to work together. And so when you merge cultures, you have to have a mechanism to where people of different cultures can work together to get a common output. And that's why it's a great training ground to learn about how to be respectful of other people's cultures. And you see it at the break time, you see it at lunch. Everybody's got a different way of, taking their breaks or what they're eating. Right? And so it is crucial that you are sensitive to these cultural issues when you're managing labor. One of the other issues that comes up all the time, because in the warehousing business, probably 75% of the labor is temporary. It's not full-time employees. It ranges from 90% to 50%, depending on the operation and the complexity of the operation. Normally, what we find is that the full-time employees get treated one way and the part-time employees get treated another way. A good example is here on campus, the full-time faculty gets treated one way and the adjunct faculty, like myself, get treated another way. Almost like, two levels of citizenship, right? Well, what's unique about my boss, you have to take his class, his name's Mike McMullen, great boss, is he treats everybody the same, right? Well, what he gets then is he gets all this flexibility from the part-time workforce that can adapt and be available when he needs to be available and change courses, do whatever, because he treats us all the same way. We get invited to the same meetings, we get treated the same way. So that's something to consider. Now, It's not particularly difficult to do that if you're respectful of people individually and not necessarily their role. One of the things that we like to talk about is the value of technology. One of the things in our entrepreneur class I talk about extensively, that as the owner of the business, there's two things you have to be the expert in. One is generating revenue, the other one is technology, because it has such a great impact on your productivity. Okay, I think I answered all the rest of them. Okay, we're good. That would be the study guide for IBUS 75, test number 2.